justifications versus pragmatic justifications on the T-debate. So I'm going to start by reading a T-shell, and I want you to pinpoint which standard is a semantic justification, which one is a pragmatic justification, and I also want you to pinpoint where the spikes are for why semantic justifications come first, okay?
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. For people following along at home, I'd also recommend you flow and then pause your timer and see if you can pinpoint where the semantic justifications are, where the pragmatic justifications are, and where the spikes are. I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay.
Okay. This is the municipality T, which you've heard before.
Okay.
Okay. Interpretation. Living wage laws are city-enacted wage policies creating a wage floor for businesses in contract with the city and or receiving assistance from the city and or city employers. Violation. The living wage and minimum wage are distinct policies that proving that the AF is topical. Confirming cross-examination standards. First is field context. My most accurate and best reflects topic lit. A point is my evidence compares between types of wage floor policies, showing that it accounts for the entirety of the topic literature. B point is my interpret is the result of a panel of leading scholars in labor economics, CRA 2. For the project, CRA enlisted leading scholars in the fields of labor economics. The team included Dr. Newmark, a leading researcher in labor economics, and has done pioneering work on poverty impacts of living wage laws. Dr. Riddlebohr, the incoming president of the American Real Estate and Urban Economics Association. Dr. Yeaser, leading researcher in regional and urban economics. And Dr. Hammermesh, past president of the Society of Labor Economics. End quote. Their credentials are proven by New York City hiring them to analyze the effects of living wages. Finally, this is all especially significant because it proves my interpret is the consensus definition by leading scholars and policymakers. C point is my interpretation aligns with usage by labor activists. Martin 01. The demand for a living wage is not new. Labor and community activists use it to refer to a narrow set of legislative strategies. Minimum wage laws establish a standard for wages that apply to all employers. Living wage policies set an absolute minimum standard but apply only to employers who hold public contracts or receive public monies. End quote. Also shows that my interpretation is static within academic literature. Martin and CRA were published 10 years apart. Field context key to fairness in education because it determines what the terms in the resolution mean and thus divides relevant ground in literature. And semantic justifications like field context have logical priority to pragmatics. Pragmatic approach would say that I'll give you $1 million if bachelors are married, even though you want the money. The pragmatic approach only offers a reason to want the statement to be true, not an actual reason for the statement to be true. The second standard is resolvability. Your interp causes conflation on the empirics debate. Living and minimum wage lit is distinct and needs to be treated separately. This equivocation destroys judges' abilities to know what evidence is actually discussing the asked advocacy. Verified by rounds on this topic, people read both minimum wage and living wage literature without acknowledging that the evidence links back to different advocacies. Distortions of resolvability skew judge evaluations and proliferate misunderstandings, so upholding resolvability is crucial to fair and educational rounds. The third standard is limits. In their world, the AF could defend any sector in combination of government implementing the living wage. My interpret escapes this harm by limiting sectors through contractors and not allowing specification on the national level. Limits are key to fairness because they ensure reciprocal access to prep. Fourth standard is advocacy skills. Your interpret ignores political realities. You couldn't just raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Having a debate underneath my interpret is key to defending real-world positions and work towards social change. Keddy. Social advocates have found strong opposition at the higher levels of government to increase minimum wages and have begun to look into lower levels of government. As more municipalities pass living wage policies, higher wages at the low income level will likely become more widely accepted. With this wider acceptance, raising minimum wage could become less politically sensitive. End quote. Advocacy skills key to fairness because they determine our ability to create and defend positions. Voter is fairness. Vote because debate is competitive activity based on skills and wins and losses. And semantical considerations come first under T to prevent frivolous theory debate because we can always argue about marginal benefits of one interpretation, but there is only one true way to interpret the meaning of the topic. Okay, so which standards are semantic and which ones are pragmatic?
First standard is semantic, and second and third are pragmatic. The resolvability and limits are pragmatic justification. Oh, and also advocacy skills. So only the first standard is semantic.
Cool. So this T-shell has 3 pragmatic, 1 semantic.
Sure.
Where are the 2 arguments for why semantics comes first?
First is directly under field context, and before resolvability is semantic comes first because pragmatic says that it's only pragmatic benefits only want an argument to be true doesn't mean it's true. Then the second justification is at the end of the shell, semantic first because we can always argue about the marginal benefits, but there's only one way to debate correctly about the interval.
Okay, so on your flow, it's super important for you to recognize that and either star it or circle it or make sure that you understand that those arguments are there.
Okay, yeah.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to go through a quick overview of the difference between semantic and pragmatic justifications, and then we're going to practice weighing between the two.
Uh-huh.
So weighing can happen on 2 levels here, right? Actually, we'll get to the weighing conversation last. Let's go through the difference between the two. So, what are semantic justifications? Semantic justifications explain the accurate reading of the resolution, i.e., it's what the resolution really means. Right? Linguistically, the resolution probably only has one true meaning if we don't take the indexical argument to be true. The indexical argument is the one you heard yesterday, where we were talking about how, like, if I say the word cool, right, has several meanings. So I could say like you are cool, indicating that you are like a good person, or you're being cool could indicate that your tone is not being very nice. You're not being very warm to me right now, right? Or I could say it is cool. And it is cool could be like it's okay that you did that, or it could be the weather outside is actually literally a little bit breezy, right? And so the word cool has numerous meanings, and it illustrates that if you prove it true underneath one meaning, but your opponent disproves it underneath another meaning, it's still true underneath the first meaning, so you've met your affirmative burden, presumably. That's the indexical argument. So the semantics first argument would probably presume that there is only one meaning that is the best meaning. Right? My example presumed that that the two different definitions of the word cool there were equally legitimate.
Sure.
But like if I say you're really cool, right?
That depends on the context.
Right, the context and the tone of how I speak probably has a huge effect. Now, we run into a problem in debate because the resolution doesn't have a tone, right? It's not written sarcastically or with an emphasis on a certain word, right? The resolution is toneless, so all we're left with then is context. So, semantic justifications presume that there is a best justification. Make sense? So, let's say there are multiple legitimate interpretations of the topic. How would we resolve which one is best? Through the pragmatic justifications.
Sure.
Right? So semantics is essentially a nib. It's like a litmus test for the T debate. It says that if your interp is semantically acceptable, then we can debate whether it is pragmatically good or bad.
But I thought semantic justifications that presume that there's only one correct justification.
Right. So underneath semantics, for example, on this living wage topic, right? So semantics seem to be pretty clear in the sense that they don't specify a government. Sure. It says just governments, right? But the semantics are a lot less clear on whether they specify a living wage sector, like or a type of living wage, right? Like it could be the case that living wages are only applied to a certain sector. Such as this T-shell that you just heard was arguing that living wages are only applied to municipalities. So even though the resolution lacks specification to municipalities, the actual definition of a living wage is municipalities.
Okay.
Now, another person could have a definition of living wage that says it is specific to the restaurant industry. Okay. Right? Now, between these two definitions of a living wage, presuming that both are legitimate definitions provided by experts in the field, then we'd have to weigh out which one is more pragmatically correct.
Okay, sure.
Now, again, that presumption that they're both equally legitimate is a huge presumption.
So if one argument is, well, does strength of link times strength of impact weighing apply under here? Like if you win, your standard is like a little bit more semantically correct than my standard, but if I win, my standard has a huge pragmatic benefit over yours. Can my definition outweigh?
That is a fantastic question, Kirk, and
because if it's framed as a litmus test, then probably not, right?
Exactly. So it's a question of, are semantic justifications a litmus test, or do we compare them? Because if they're comparative, i.e. we can weigh strength of link times strength of impact, and we could say, look, the semantics debate is reasonably close. Their interp may be semantically more justified, and mine is pragmatically a little bit less, or semantically a little bit less justified, but pragmatically my interp is a lot better. Then presumably, even if they win semantics outweigh pragmatics, you are going to win that debate, because then it's just the case that they have a tiny link into the bigger impact, but you have a huge link into the smaller impact.
Okay, sure.
Make sense? That's just like a traditional util debate.
Sure.
But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, so let's go real quick to pragmatic justifications. So pragmatic justifications give reasons why adopting a certain reading of the resolution would be more or less fair than other readings of the resolution.
Or educational.
Exactly. So these answer the question, what should the resolution mean? The example given in the T-shell is about wanting to believe that bachelors are married men, right? If I give you $1 million to believe that bachelors are married, pragmatically, you would redefine bachelor as married.
Sure.
Semantically, though, that's not a good reason to believe that bachelors are married. That's just a reason you want the money, not a reason why bachelors are actually married.
Sure.
Does that make sense? So similarly, using that analogy to debate, we could say, look, like your AF may produce great debates. It might have great ground and might be like really awesome for debate. But the problem is it's not what the resolution was talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So let's talk about when this debate is relevant. This debate is most relevant on a T debate, specifically on spec debates.
Sure.
On whether the AF can specify an actor in the resolution when the resolution lacks such specifications, right? Obviously, the most popular trending article right now is the one written by Jake Niebel on the VBriefly website, and everyone's cut that Niebel card now, and everyone's been reading it, and it's just collectively now referred to as Niebel-T, right?
Sure.
So the argument is just that just governments lack modifiers, and so you can't add a modifier and maintain semantic legitimacy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, in that case, a semantic justification would tend to conclude that the AF cannot spec an actor.
Sure.
However, a pragmatic justification is much more open-ended. There's a lot of different reasons why actor spec is a good or a bad thing in terms of fairness in education, right? It might increase depth of research, but it might kill research burdens, or kill quality of ground, or kill predictability. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's talk about how to weigh between the two. So the first thing you have to resolve is whether or not semantic justifications are a litmus test, i.e. if it's so a great way to think about it is it an ends-based standard in the sense that you can compare, or is it just an all or nothing that you have to be semantically justified?
Sure.
That's the first question that needs to be answered. Very rarely, actually I've never seen it happen, where a debater makes reasons why semantic justifications, like the semantics, is a necessary constraint on T. Right? Usually those arguments would come in the form of jurisdiction. They would say that if you are not semantically in line with what the resolution means, the judge does not have jurisdiction to vote for you.
Sure.
That would make semantics a litmus test. But it still wouldn't answer the question of where does the threshold lie for the litmus test? Is the threshold absolute perfection? Is the threshold absolute perfection on semantics? Or is the threshold something a little bit lower than that? I.e., you have to have a legitimate author advocating for what you believe in, for what the resolution means. Or there has to be some X amount of literature on the topic.
So, in terms of perfection in litmus test, if you win, that your standard is more semantically correct than the other ones, even if the other standard is sufficiently semantically correct, then you would be ahead on the T debate.
Yeah. Under the model where you have to be absolutely perfect on the semantics debate, you would win the T debate.
Sure.
Regardless of the pragmatic justifications.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the first first huge relevant consideration on semantics. The next huge relevant consideration on semantics is impact framing. Cool. So, in terms of impact framing, you have to figure out what is the most important consideration on do semantics outweigh pragmatics, right? Is it a question of abiding by intuitions, or maintaining logical priority, or maximizing fairness, or maximizing education, or maintaining jurisdiction? So, similar to how on paradigm debates like fairness versus education, where we had to impact frame, do we care more about the long-term pragmatic benefits from debate, or do we care about the constitutive nature of the activity and maintaining that nature of the activity? We have to do the same thing for impact framing on semantics versus pragmatics. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to practice that. I'm going to read a bunch of reasons semantics come first, and then you're going to respond with the presumption that you're going for pragmatics come first, and that you have a reasonable link into semantics.
Sure.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me know when you're ready.
Give me a throw. I'm good.
Okay. First, semantics have categorical priority on T. Accurately defined interpretations determine predictable ground. Merrill 1. For meaningful debate, both teams must share an understanding of the topic. A shared understanding can only be achieved if both teams follow the same method of analysis when they consider the topic and seek to define the resolution as accurately as possible. Because this is a mutual expectation, the most accurately defined interpretation becomes the only predictable interpretation. Expecting the negative to prepare against every possible interpretation of the resolution would pose an insurmountable burden. 2 impacts. A point is severe loss of predictable ground under their interpretation in this round. B point is interpreting the resolution accurately is the only coherent basis for predictable ground. Debate's nonsensical without predictable ground, so preserving its basis is constitutively necessary for the activity. Functions as a side constraint on theory, since theory preserves the valuable parts of debate, but debate is meaningless without a basis for predictable ground. Second is semantics first preserve clash and combats. Semantics first preserves clash and combats proliferation of abusive strategies. Nebel. It would be better if everyone debated the resolution instead of whatever variation they favored. Affirmatives would unfairly choose their unpredictable adventure, and the negatives would respond with strategies designed to avoid clash. Well-being is maximized by people sticking to rules. Otherwise, people engage in self-serving violations of useful rules, undermining well-being in the long run. This is exactly what happens if we reject the topicality rule in favor of direct appeals to pragmatic considerations. 2 impacts. A point is their interpretation proliferates avoidant and abusive strategies. B point is no recourse under their interp against these strategies without prioritizing semantics first. Self-serving violations of the topicality rule are de facto legitimate. Third is you don't have jurisdiction to vote on a non-topical case. NFL mandated topic is analogous to mandated speech times. They're both defining features of the activity. The judge should uphold debating the topic just as much as they would only evaluate arguments within speeches. Fourth argument is the immediate guaranteed abuse of semantically non-topical interpretation outweighs its speculative debate benefits. Merrill 3 or 2. Even if altering the topic could provide access to a preferable ground or education, those benefits will not materialize in this current debate. The non-topical education and non-topical ground and education that one team seeks cannot be used in the current debate because the issue of topicality is already subsumed the entire focus of the round. The immediate and guaranteed abuse that occurs as a result of reinterpreting the topic vastly outweighs speculative benefits that are unlikely to materialize. Means semantic abuse outweighs on A, probability. We know it'll happen in this debate, whereas we won't be present for the pragmatic benefits in future debates. And B, magnitude. This is the last tournament of my career, so I won't be able to enjoy pragmatic benefits later down the line. Don't end my career for benefits I won't see. Fifth is logical consistency. It doesn't matter how good debate looks under your world if your interp can't prove the truth of the resolution. Nebel. Pragmatic considerations cannot justify interpretations that are ruled out on semantic grounds. If the resolution does not mean X, then it does not matter how much better it would be to debate X. Sixth, semantics are lexically prior to pragmatics. 2 warrants. Nebel. First, it would be better if everyone debated the resolution as worded, then debated whatever subtle we already read that argument. Second, suppose that so semantics are lexically prior to pragmatics. Nebel. Let's start the card again. Suppose that you give your opponents notice that you'll be affirming the 2012 resolution. It's unfair to expect your opponents to follow suit because they didn't agree to debate that topic. That accepting a tournament invitation constitutes implicit consent to debating the specified topic. Next argument is that there's no bright line when we prioritize pragmatics. Your world creates arbitrary rules. Nebel. This view justifies debating propositions that are completely irrelevant to the resolution but are much better to debate. Once you say that pragmatic benefits can justify debating a proposition or that the resolution means whatever it would be best for it to mean, there is no threshold for similarity in order to be an eligible interpretation of the resolution. End quote. Impact is it creates a race to the bottom where the resolution never actually gets discussed, so my interpretation also best preserves topic education. And semantic justifications like grammar have logical priority to pragmatics. A pragmatic approach could say, I'll give you $1 million if bachelors are married. Even though you want the money, the pragmatic approach only offers a reason to want the statement to be true, not a reason why it's actually true. Also, last argument is semantic considerations come first under T to prevent frivolous theory debate because we can always argue about marginal benefits of one interpretation, but there is only one true way to interpret the meaning of the resolution. Cool. So set your timer, give yourself as much time as you need. My guess is you'll need a little bit more than 5 minutes. There's a lot here. So notice how this speech itself didn't have any impact framing.
Right.
Right? It sort of just threw the kitchen sink out at you. And presumably the 2 and R would have a bunch of impact framing. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So for those of you following along at home, I hope you've taken some prep time and given a speech. And now you should compare your speech, having recorded it, to the one that Kirk is about to give. And then incorporate my feedback into Kirk's arguments and do a redo, and you'll hear part 2 of it sometime later whenever we come out with part 2 of the video series. Cool.
Okay. Starting with the overview of the line by line. You ready?
Yeah.
Before we evaluate the pragmatic versus semantic debate on line by line, you need a framework to filter out which impacts are most important. We should be more concerned about what is constitutive of the activity rather than grammar or logical consistency, because everyone do debate to win. This can be empirically verified. People don't fly across country to learn about debate, to learn about grammar and logical consistency. They're here to win rounds. If people really cared about grammar, they probably should read a dictionary. And then let's go through your line by line. Your first argument is a German critical ground. One, there's probably a reason why we should weigh the strength of link of pragmatic benefits into semantic arguments. We should weigh the loss ground versus argument system. Second is basic question. On necessary versus sufficiency. If my argument is to give you sufficient predictable ground, then that should probably be able to solve for your offense. 3. This links back to the question of pragmatism, which means not independently justifying the argument, which means that you don't have to externally your second argument key to class 1 turn on. There's more unfair strategies if you think semantics come first because you don't prioritize pragmatic benefit. Only pragmatic benefits tell you which arguments are fair or unfair. Second probably means that you can weigh the abuse of the fairness caused by the semantic arguments versus unfairness caused by the loss of pragmatic arguments. The third argument, number 3, 1, judges don't vote on jurisdiction error voted on chaos or non-typical terms all the time. 3, second, there's no warrant why should you follow the NFL rules right on TOC. Your number 4 argument. 1, there's no warrant why pragmatic benefits are not immediate. You had good arguments against affirmative this round. You simply chose to engage via topicality. Second, it's not unique. You don't access the immediate benefit from semantics. Your warrant is that I don't access benefit because I ran T. However, the same applies to for you. You don't access semantic benefits because you ran T. Your fifth argument said logical consistency. There's actually no warrant in this argument. Your evidence literally says that the resolution doesn't mean X, and it doesn't mean we should be better to debate X. There's no warrant justifying this argument. Your sixth argument is a logical lexical priority. However, so it's still a question of necessary versus sufficiency. Your warrant and evil evidence that unfair to debate on a 2012 topic. Clearly, we're not debating the 2012 topic. If there are multiple legitimate interpretations of the topic, that means that we should probably default to the pragmatic benefits. Your next evil argument says no bright line. However, clearly there is bright line comedian interpretation, which means that means that we should link the most often fractional interpretation, which is the bright line for this argument. Your next argument is that grammar is logically prior. 1, sufficiently being grammatical, which solves your often. Second, no reason why grammar is logically prior. You don't stop at 3. Grammar is probably grammar is I can't read that argument. Your next argument is that it comes first on your key because there's only one interpretation to determine meaning. However, no, there are multiple legitimate interpretations proven empirically proven by all the rounds where debaters are one on different interpretation of living wage. Probably means that there are different interpretations.
I think that in terms of pragmatics come first, categories of arguments you're missing for why pragmatics should definitely outweigh is first explaining why strength of length times strength of impact is the proper paradigm to evaluate this debate. That it's not a question of just one impact outweighs the other categorically. That it's a question of let's compare impacts, and even if you win that your impact is more, if I win that my link is stronger into pragmatics than your link is into semantics, then I should win this debate. That should also be a big picture overview here.
Sure.
Right? I think another category of arguments you should point out with pragmatic benefits is that if it is indeed the case that your interp is pragmatically more useful for a debate, then there's probably a huge educational advantage to voting for pragmatics. Right? So that's important. You should probably take advantage of that and leverage that. And say like the long-lasting nature of the pragmatic benefits is more important than what the resolution really meant. If you have an opportunity to learn something about the resolution right now, and it makes your experience in the community and educationally more rich, then we should just prefer that experience over semantics.
Sure, that makes sense.
You have to be careful here, though, because there's a lot of arguments that semantics hijack the link into pragmatics.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like there's a bunch of arguments in this block for why being correct semantically is crucial to maximizing pragmatic benefits. So, along that lines then, I think you need to engage those arguments more head-on. So, I think the first thing you need to point out is that there's a huge difference between types of unsemantical interpretations, right? There's a difference between you standing up and being like, I am now going to affirm the 2012 September-October topic,
Sure.
and you standing up and saying living wages are specific to restaurant workers,
Yeah.
right? It's like the difference between standing up and saying the LA Lakers are the best basketball team in the National Basketball Association, and the difference, and that's like what you're, and that's the next burden is the converse to
Yeah.
prove that the Lakers are not the best basketball
Yeah,
team.
I think I made that argument against number 6, but I need to make it as more of a Rioch type argument, I think.
Right, exactly. These arguments need to be engaging the do semantics hijack the link into pragmatics arguments.
Okay.
Your point should be that the second type of semantical violation, the one that's completely random and has nothing to do with the topic, definitely kills predictable ground and is awful for pragmatics.
Wait, what?
So the type of semantic justifications where you're like, I'm just going to stand up and affirm the 2012 September-October topic, right? That definitely kills ground.
Right,
And especially predictable ground. All the Merrill arguments here make a ton of sense.
Right.
In that context.
Yeah, but if I'm just affirming restaurant workers, probably it doesn't make sense.
Right. And then the next argument you need to make on the big picture for the fairness debate, whether or not semantics control the strongest link into fairness, is that you need to point out that there are several independent links for predictability. What the resolution really means is just one of them. Another link is like what's been disclosed on the case wiki.
Sure.
So, for example, Mission San Jose last year was reading a prisons app, right, at CPS, and that gained a lot of popularity, and people started reading prison apps on the living wage topic. That app is questionably topical, right? But no one could say by the time TOC came around that that app was unpredictable.
Right.
We all knew that that was an app, right? Now, I think that this is what Niebel means, though, when he says that debaters will just start their own unpredictable adventure, and everyone will just go off into different directions, and everyone will be like, well, I broke the Kazakhstan plan at the last tournament, so there's no reason you shouldn't have prep on Kazakhstan, right? And that's sort of what you see at TOC Outrounds Day, right? Like, in TOC Outrounds, arguably the most important day of the debate season, at least for, like, competitively, a lot of people break new plans.
Right.
And the idea behind the new plan is that your opponent won't have prep on them.
Right.
So you're not breaking that new plan to get a pragmatically rich debate. Like you're like all the pragmatic justifications from ActorSpec are like, oh, debate looks better, there's more ground, there's more specific link turns, there's more education, there's more depth, there's more breadth, etc. That doesn't happen if the neg doesn't have cards.
Right.
Right? And so the point there is that that is just not a predictable AF because it's not what the resolution means. Like if the resolution had been specific to whatever country the AF had specified, then yes, the negative would have had evidence ready to roll. But when the resolution doesn't specify a country and there's 200 different countries the AF can choose from, some countries are obviously more predictable than others, such as the US, right? But the point that he is making is that regardless, the point that he is making is that Niebel is making is that it's just like an awful norm for debate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
So I think that those are the biggest adjustments that should happen on the pragmatics versus justification versus semantics debate.
Sure.
The other thing you need to make sure here is that if you're the 1AR or the 2AR, that you're not getting buried in these arguments, because then you still have to win the line by line.
Right.
If you remember the T-shell had 3 different arguments on pragmatics.
Right, yeah.
So a smart debater will not hedge all their bets into the semantics first.
Oh, yeah, because he can just turn it.
Right. And so he'll kick, like, Jackson was ready to kick the semantics first debate in the 2NR if the 1AR over-invested on it and said, okay, I agree, pragmatics come first. Too bad for you. You're really drastically mishandling these second, third, and fourth standards. Probably a reason I'm coming out ahead on pragmatics.
Yeah, sure.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's important for you to maintain sight of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
This debate will not win you the round, nor will it win you the T debate.
Sure.
This is just impact weighing.
Yeah.
And impact framing. Impact framing can make the impact weighing easier. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so redo makes sense.
Sure.
And then we want, how long did that take?
235.
235. Okay. Ideally, you can do that debate in 2 minutes. That should be the goal. And I would also recommend typing a lot of this out. At least the big picture stuff. So that way you can just spread through it.
Sure.
Cool. Any questions?
No, I'm good.
Cool. So for those of you following along at home, drill set is to incorporate Kirk's arguments into the arguments you missed, and then incorporate my feedback and add those arguments as well, and then see if you can give this speech in 2 minutes. Cool. No other questions, yeah, Kirk?
No.